Welcome. Say hello to Gabriel.
Hi. Hello. Thanks for coming.
I'm Giles, and I want to start, because we are a modern media company, with a little bit of audience research.
Make sure I've turned this off. Yes, I have.
Who has come because they've read the book? Anybody? That's okay. It's for sale afterwards. Who's come because they've listened to the podcasts? Right. And who's come just because they love Tortoise and they come to... Okay, maybe a bit of an overlap there.
Because they love Trump.
You what?
Because they love Trump or hate Trump.
I wasn't going to ask that one. Who's come because they love or hate Trump?
Well, I think you should separate these things out.
It was never going to be scientific audience research. Yes.
Who's come because they're particularly interested in what's happening in the US and the impact that has on the rest of the world?
Great question. Okay. So.
But can I just ask one? Who's come because they love Trump? I suspected as much.
So here's how this is going to work. We used to do more think-ins than we do now, but please, let's hear from anyone who wants to be heard. It doesn't have to be a question. In fact, as you know, it keeps things moving along more swiftly if it's not a question, because it means that Gabriel doesn't necessarily have to respond. You may just have things that you want to get off your chest. We'll start with a little bit of chat about the book, but do not hold questions until the end, otherwise there'll just be too many of them being squeezed into the final 10 minutes and we just won't get to them. Just raise your hand, and even though I've lost my glasses, I think I will see you, and if I don't...
I'll see you.
Are you at contact? I know you've got your glasses on your head.
These are for reading. For dramatic effect.
It feels to me, since a lot of you have heard the podcasts, even though you've not read the book yet, that I can ask the question, if you don't mind, as a sort of opener, what is the storm, without it being a spoiler?
Mm-hmm. I think the storm is possibly about to come, right? Because the storm is the sort of assault on the establishment norms, institutions of America. Well, I should say there are two storms. The title of The Coming Storm came from this QAnon conspiracy theory, which was this idea that the American establishment had been captured by a cabal of Satan-worshipping pedophiles who may or may not have been operating out of the basement of a pizzeria in Washington, D.C. that didn't have a basement. And they talked about a coming storm when the cabal would be unmasked, there would be show trials, and the worst offenders would be executed in the streets. And this is one of the kind of narratives that led to the storming of the Capitol on January the 6th, 2021. I took that idea and sort of slightly turned it around and asked, with this movement, this Trumpian movement post-January the 6th, and also in the run-up to it, is there a real storm coming, which is this kind of catastrophic loss of faith in the institutions of America, in its democracy, in the probity and honesty of its civil servants, in the system, basically. And if so, how is that going to play out? And I think Trump's victory, and certainly the people that he wants to bring with him to the White House, people from Elon Musk through to Bobby Jr., Kennedy, Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, the man who thinks that the FBI is a deep state plot. Hello, I recognize you. He wants to put a man who thinks that the FBI is part of the deep state, and he wants to turn the Hoover Building in Washington into a museum of the deep state. He wants to put him in charge of the FBI, right? That feels like a storm is coming.
Right. So the storm, the chronology is extraordinary as regards the book itself. You kind of finished it in the spring of last year, or the summer?
Summer, yeah.
Yeah, and so we can already see that in a sense the storm is the election result, the nominations that are happening right now. In another sense, as you say, it's what comes next. But let's go back a little bit, first of all, because the book, I didn't know I was going to be taken back to Vince Foster. I didn't know I was going to be educated on Bill Clinton, for example. Guys. God, I found myself revisualizing him at the funeral of Jimmy Carter and thinking I've got to rethink that whole
this guy.
thing.
Yeah.
Is that bad or positive? I didn't know what you...
Shall we go into that?
Well, we could go into it.
Well, let me ask the question first. I'm sorry, I'm being too long-winded. But the book covers a lot of different chapters from of great American conspiracy theories from about then onwards. Not quite going back to the book depository, but and one thread is clearly tech. And tech is an enabler of everything that used to be disparate coming together.
Yeah.
But I wonder what for you the human thread is. Is it loneliness in a sense? I mean, you talk about a catastrophic loss of faith or the risk of, but expand.
Well, the human factor for me was, and I think this is a lesson that I've learned, is don't ignore the weird shit, right? Because as people who've listened to the podcast will know, and I'll just do it very briefly, my way into this was I was in Phoenix, Arizona in 2020, a couple of days after the election. There was this Stop the Steal movement. I'm working for Newsnight. I'm covering this, kind of bogus idea that the election was stolen, but it's becoming a political force, so it's worth covering, worth the attention of serious journalism. And I meet a guy draped in furs, horns on his head, with a sign saying Q sent me. I'm like, oh, he looks great, because TV journalism is partly about the visuals as well as the journalism. It's about 50% showbiz. So I go up to him without my cameraman and start having a chat, and he's, friendly enough, but completely bonkers, right? He believes in this whole, cabal business. So I'm like, I'm not going to stick you on Newsnight. It would be irresponsible, right? Let's not do that. Let's not be that journalist. And so, I didn't. And then 2 months later, there he is in the Senate chamber, taken over, in the seat where Vice President Pence has just fled in fear of his life, scribbling, justice is coming. It's only a matter of time. And so I realized that I had ignored the weird guy. And the weird guy, even though he was a weird guy and remains a weird guy, and even though his entire theory is based on like crazy half-truths and sort of connections between things that ought not to exist, nevertheless, his worldview was something significant. There was a reason why he believed what he believed, and what he believed was about to kind of crack open the whole of American politics. So I had ignored the weird guy, and so I'd missed the story. And in a way, the whole coming storm was a sort of attempt to correct that mistake. And I think, one of the things in the 90s and the Clintons was that there were a lot of crazy conspiracy theories going around about the Clintons. And obviously, establishment journalists, serious journalists with a reputation, did not want to fall into the kind of conspiracy theorist trap. So they would ignore a lot of the kind of weird stuff, nasty stuff that was going on about the Clintons. And no worries. And some of that stuff turned out to be true, to go to your point, which, if you want to read the book, there's a detailed description about a woman who claims, though Clinton's spokesman's denied it, but she claims it, quite credibly, that Bill Clinton raped her in a hotel room in 1978. And, she's not the only woman, as we know, to claim that Clinton was sexually, was essentially a sexual predator, these claims, right? The Monica Lewinsky stuff is the tip of the iceberg. But so all of that stuff was kind of dismissed as well until Monica, and they couldn't ignore it anymore, which came out of the internet, by the way. It was Matt Drudge, the Drudge Report, that first broke that. And it made everyone else follow. But it was them ignoring the weird stuff that then, at least in the way I've written this narrative, was sort of pushed these real concerns, which were more than just about Clinton's behavior. It was also about economic stagnation and wage stagnation in the United States, which was also sort of brushed under the carpet in that kind of decade of euphoria when liberalism in all its forms had won, right? Economic liberalism, the Cold War was over, communism was dead, economic liberalism had won, but social liberalism had won. Bill Clinton was in the White House. He occupied such a wide swathe of the political center ground that essentially to oppose Bill Clinton, you had to be a fringe nutcase because there was only space on the fringes. But then all of that was ignored, and it is now, bubbling up to the surface and bubbling all the way into the White House.
What's it been like for you professionally, being from the most mainstream media brand possibly in the world, dipping your toe in this, and then your foot, and then getting... and you write rather affectionately about Ambrose Evans Pritchard, the
Absolutely.
Sunday Telegraph guy in the Washington, who dove right in. And do you think that but for the sort of immunisation of carrying a BBC microphone around, it would have been harder for you to keep your bearings?
Well, I think the BBC training was a good one, right? Get two sources, right? Question stuff. And so, as one of the people I interviewed, there was an expert on conspiracy theorists, said to me, he said, because I worried I was falling down the rabbit hole, because I did start seeing connections everywhere. And in a way, this book is kind of structured like a conspiracy theory, except a conspiracy theory constructed out of verifiable facts, which I can tell you is a hard thing to do, and I don't recommend anyone does it at home. It drives you slightly nuts. But one of these people I interviewed, who was an expert on conspiracy theories, said I wasn't a very good conspiracy theorist because I hadn't jumped from William Rees-Mogg to Jacob Rees-Mogg to the fact that Jacob Rees-Mogg had worked for some offshoot of the Rothschild bank. So I'd obviously failed as a conspiracy theorist because I had not jumped to Rothschild, and we all know where that goes. Keeping your head above water. I would say that my view of the world has changed. I think when I went into this, I was sort of like, where is this crazy stuff coming from? I now have a sort of fairly good idea of where the crazy stuff is coming from, and you will read the book or listen to the podcast, but you also come to realize that there are quite often grains of truth at the root of these conspiracy theories that do require grappling with, right? So when we talk about, we did the whole first series of the podcast about this crazy story about a cabal of elite pedophiles that were running America, and we never once mentioned Jeffrey Epstein. It's, awkward. Like, Jeffrey Epstein doesn't mean that America's been taken over by a cabal of elite pedophiles, but Jeffrey Epstein was a pedophile, and he ran in very elite circles, and so far only one person has been held accountable for his crimes. That doesn't seem quite enough. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And
in the circles that you investigated, is that particular story being taken a vindication of anything?
Yeah, I mean that's the sort of one of the central pillars of their, like, you mainstream people, you kind of laugh at QAnon, but there it is. It's all there. They take that as total vindication. I mean, this is why, if you look at Elon Musk in the weeks before the election, Elon Musk had gone full Q, basically. He was tweeting, I think he said something like, he didn't want to tweet it, he said it at a rally in Pennsylvania. He said, it would be interesting to see, he said, obviously Biden and Harris were puppets, and it would be interesting to see the crossover between the Biden and Harris puppet masters and Jeffrey Epstein's client list. Full Q, right? And this guy is now, is he going to be the second most powerful person in the White House? Is he going to be the most powerful? I mean, until they fall out, of course, which won't take long, but, So, yeah.
Let's talk just briefly about Hunter Biden, or any other... Why?
You can't have a Trump without Hunter Biden.
Well, or there may be other examples. I mean, you mentioned the whole Clinton thing as an example of the establishment media looking away when it doesn't suit to look too closely.
Yeah, when it feels dangerous to look too closely because you might end up falling for some unutterable bollocks,
Yeah.
which you might.
But was it professional malpractice the way the New York Times and the Washington Post handled the Biden laptop?
I wouldn't go so far as to say professional malpractice. I would say...
Do people want to know a bit more about the Biden laptop? Chapter and verse in the book.
So the Biden laptop, very briefly, 2 weeks before the 2020 election, the New York Post, right-wing, sort of Trump-supporting Murdoch news tabloid, publishes a scoop saying that that Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, in a crack cocaine-fueled doze, had left his laptop in a laptop repair shop, and they'd looked on it, and there was all kinds of evidence of corrupt dealings, basically, in Ukraine and in China that sort of merited looking into.
A very ignorant question. Are we clear that it was him that walked into the shop?
He says he doesn't remember it, but you wouldn't if you were in a crack cocaine, which
There's no footage,
he was. There's no footage of him, but I think we're now pretty clear that this was Hunter Biden's laptop. No one's ever come out and said, "Oh, that was planted," and all of it was real and verified. All the stuff on it was real and verified, but that came later. Immediately all the TV networks said it was a hoax. The social media, Facebook and Twitter throttled it. Twitter locked the New York Post out of their account because they said they were spreading disinformation. And well, they might have thought they were spreading disinformation because the FBI had told Twitter and Facebook that to expect more Russian disinformation coming. But also the FBI had the laptop. They'd taken the laptop. Now, the most likely explanation for that was that, Agent A, who had the laptop in his drawer, hadn't spoken to Agent B, who'd been sent to Facebook to say, the Russians are trying to meddle again, which they might well have been, right? So, the much more plausible explanation is cock up rather than cover up, which I would buy. But certainly it didn't look good. So the New York Post printed it. Their reporting was absolutely on the money, by the way. Really good reporting, solid reporting. Couldn't find any fault with it. It turned out a year and a half later, the New York Times and the Washington Post sort of caught up with it and sort of verified it and quietly sort of said, "Oh, it turned out this thing was real." Anyway. By which time Joe Biden was in the White House.
You're not tooting your own horn. You had got your own copy of the hard drive.
I would be slightly tooting my own horn if I put it in that time scale. They got hold of it slightly before I did. So yes, I won't toot my horn quite to that extent. But what I would say to answer your question about malpractice is that it wasn't malpractice because the Washington Post, for example, I know, asked, so the purveyors of this drive were Rudy Giuliani and Steve Bannon, right? So immediately, if you were a good journalist, you'd be like, okay, those are suspect sources, right? We wouldn't. Then they were like, okay, can we have a look at this drive, please? This is before the election. And Giuliani and Bannon were like, no, we're not giving it to you because you're fake news and you'll do it. So of course they didn't print the story. I wouldn't have done either, right? So it's not professional malpractice. I would say that they probably didn't pursue the story with quite the same vigor as they pursued the P-tape story about Trump and his, which turned out to be a conspiracy theory, by the way. And so it was more a question of, where do you put your energies? I don't think they expended much energy on trying to stand up the Hunter Biden laptop story because it didn't fit their worldview. But they expended a lot more energy on trying to figure out whether Trump was a Russian spy.
But as you say, Twitter and Facebook deprioritized it.
Absolutely.
Which, in the new world, radically reduces the number of people who are exposed to it. And then Biden goes on to win by a whisker. No wonder people have felt sore about that.
Right. I mean, you got to prove a counterfactual. Would it have made any difference to the election result? I don't know. But certainly, and by the way, there was nothing on that laptop that proved any kind of illegal, as far as I could tell, right? And nothing in the New York Post's reporting that suggested that anything was illegal, although it was definitely distasteful, right? It was a great little window on how kind of privilege and nepotism and power and business works right at the very top. All of those emails and kind of, Hunter Biden definitely leveraging his father's name and his position then as vice president in Obama's administration to try and do business, traveling on Air Force Two while Joe Biden was going to Beijing to do official government business. Who would be second off the steps? Hunter, to go and do some business with some businessmen. And of course, in China, when you see the son of the president coming off the plane, you're going to be like, oh yeah, I'll do business with that guy. I'll give him the deal, because that's how business works in China. So, and this basically is kind of that way the world works, which to some people is just the way the world works. To many Americans whose wages are stagnant and who feel like the liberal establishment has not had their backs and has been snooty about it to boot, they're like, well, there we are. They are corrupt. They are a cabal. Okay, maybe, I don't know whether they've got a basement full of children, but never mind. It's a corrupt cabal, right? So it's like, Post-it notes and bits of string. But does QAnon as a sort of metaphor, does it acquire some kind of truth? Is the establishment screwing us? Maybe they are.
So look, if anyone has things they want to say or ask about any of the things in the book, which include Vince Foster, 4chan, 8chan, the 2000 recount, Facebook, Joel Kaplan, who's very much...
Joel Kaplan, yes. Got a whole chapter on Joel Kaplan. Who's now Nick Clegg's replacement.
Then please do, but we'll do a quick gear change in response to your very wise request.
I think just so quickly whether that would have the New York Times or the Washington Post reporting on the laptop, would that have altered the election or not? We don't know. We might think probably not. But what that did show, even if Joe Biden was not directly implicated in any of the dealings or decisions that Hunter Biden made, it reflects badly on the judgment of Joe Biden. And it reflects badly on the judgment of Joe Biden and how he didn't shut down Hunter, how he didn't speak out publicly against Hunter, and how he ultimately became very distracted by Hunter and his legal problems later on in the administration, and actually was a bit of a canary in the mine moment for the catastrophic poor judgment he showed about himself and his decision not to absent himself from kind of running as a candidate in the 2024 election. So
I think that's completely right. And on that, I think when he pardoned...
Giant, by the
way. We just do big microphones.
Some of those tortoises go to 180 years old. When Joe Biden decided to pardon Hunter a few weeks before the election, to me, that was a capitulation. And I understood why he did it as a father, because on the one hand you could say, oh, Hunter had it coming. He abused his father's position to try and do business and blah, blah, blah. On the other hand, you could say, well, Hunter's basically a victim of the political climate of the times, and you can be sure that if he hadn't pardoned him, the Trump administration would have come after him in every way possible, and in the sort of weaponization of the legal system that we do kind of expect will happen. I mean, Kash Patel, who's the nominee for FBI director, said he's got an enemies list, even though what's her name, Pam Bondi, says that she's nominated for Attorney General. Anyway, so you can understand why he would pardon him, but what he basically did with that act was that he accepted the premise that American justice is broken. Exactly. And that's Donald Trump's whole promise. You remember he came down in 2016 from the escalator. The American dream is dead. Right, that's his whole shtick. And they've held out from 2016 right up until 2024, saying, no, the American dream is not dead. No, the system may be faulty, but it can be tweaked.
He's by no means the first president to have used his pardon powers in a bit of a crass and craven way.
No. Maybe you're right.
But his explanation was so poor.
It's a forever pardon, though, isn't it? It's quite unique.
Well, I should have said there's just one. We do like you to introduce yourselves and get a microphone, but can we do that? Sorry.
Yeah, hi there, Mark Cook.
Hi.
Yeah, just to say it's a forever pardon, isn't it? It's not actually a pardon, it's for crimes in the future. It's not just about, it's because he hasn't been prosecuted, he's only been prosecuted for the...
I may not be an expert on this.
and doesn't that also then absolve Biden as well? Because of the, the possibilities of the big man being involved in stuff? So.
10% for the big guy. Yeah, you're referencing an email on Hunter Biden's laptop. That particular deal collapsed, so whatever 10% for the big guy was going to happen never happened. Anyway, I think that my understanding of it is that Hunter Biden has been pardoned for anything he might have done in the past over a 10-year period. I don't think he could go and shoot someone in Fifth Avenue, as Trump suggested, and then get away with it. So I don't think it's quite that. But I think, and obviously it's not the, Nixon was pardoned, wasn't he?
Mark Rich was pardoned.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of people. But it's the kind of the family relationship that feels... Yeah. Everyone looked at Trump and his daughters and his sons, and it felt like, a new kind of clan and nepotism. And of course, then that's being echoed by Biden. It just feels like the vision, the sort of dark MAGA vision of America, where everything is fucked and nothing works and everything is corrupt and just beneath the surface the worms are, and the justice system is broken, that he's kind of... Biden accepted that premise by saying, I need to pardon my son because American justice is so brittle that I don't trust American justice to serve my son in the future.
But he didn't say that.
He didn't, but
Said
that's what he implied.
as a father, and actually, so he sorry, I'm Susan Kennicott. I used to work and live in the US as a reporter, but years ago, when I go a lot and spend probably maybe half my year there, but the way he did it was that he had sort of strung people along through the whole kind of election period that, so I'm not going to pardon Hunter, not going to pardon Hunter, and then kind of flipped, and the way he flipped was really, his speech was so terrible. If he had said what you said and articulated it much more clearly, which unfortunately he's not able to do on anything anymore, so he was vulnerable, that's what screwed everybody over and made everybody so angry. And he sort of sunk, he almost said, well, we'll just let the Republicans behave as badly as I've just behaved. I mean, he just... Yeah, I mean,
I mean, he strung everyone along with his running, I mean, he should have pulled out. It's sort of disastrous.
Okay. Just a quick thing from me, and then we'll get on. I don't want to spend too long in the Hunter Biden rabbit hole. Yeah. But as you said, you feel that your acquaintance with all the sources for the book, all the people that you've spoken to in this world, have equipped you to understand perhaps a little better than average last year and the November election. How much is the QAnon vision of America, the conspiratorial vision broadly defined, responsible for that result?
Well, I think that there was a, just before the election, there was a Siena College New York Times poll, which kind of gave it all as on a knife edge, as all the polls did. But if you dug down deep into the questions, they asked them all sorts of questions, and they asked voters whether they thought that the current political and judicial system in America was working just fine, needed minor tweaks, or was really screwed and needed major overhaul, or needed tearing down. About, I think it's just over 40, I think it was like 41% thought it was doing just fine or needed minor tweaks. And that was basically the kind of Democrat offer, right? And just under 60% thought it was so awful that it needed kind of complete overhaul or tearing down altogether. And that was obviously the idea that the establishment is in a conspiracy against you is part of that worldview. I'm not saying that everybody all of the 58% subscribe to this kind of conspiratorial worldview, but the idea that when they tell you that everything is fine, which is kind of broadly what the politicians and the liberal media and mainstream media, whatever you want to call them, are telling you, they're not telling you the truth. That's the kind of conspiratorial worldview. And I, when I saw that response in that poll, I thought Trump's going to win this. And so it turned out.
And that was what, about a month out, or?
It was less than that. It was, I think, 2 weeks out.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say that it's more that it's whether America, as it has been presented to you, is working, or whether it's not. And I think the conspiratorial worldview is a sort of subset of that. But this is how you square the kind of really kind of crazy sort of Steve Bannon conspiracy theory type people with the Elon Musks, who really I'm 100% sure doesn't believe that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden are puppets with the same as Jeffrey Epstein, but they don't believe that America is working. They don't believe politics works. They think they should get rid of all of it, right? They're anarcho-capitalists and libertarians. They just want to get rid of it all. So that's how they kind of fit into this galaxy and constellation that is now moving into the White House.
I feel pretty strongly, by the way, that there is a real-world explanation for last year's election.
I know what your explanation is.
Go on.
Inflation.
There's a bit of that, yes.
Which was a very real thing,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, absolutely. But go on, what's your...
Inflation as a part of, just really, really workaday stuff like cost of living.
Yeah,
and
cost of living is
Democrats
such a big
completely
thing.
failing to realise that, as James Carville realised too late. And if the Democrats were to fall into the trap of thinking it was all because of a QAnon worldview, then they'll lose again.
Yeah, well,
Anyway.
there are many reasons why they might lose again. They're completely at sixes and sevens. They've got no idea what they want to stand for anymore. MAGA, for better or for worse, they kind of know what they stand for. Everything is shit, and we're going to tear it down, and we're going to start again.
There was a hand up over here. Do you have a microphone, sir?
Hello, Nacho Moraes. I wanted to comment on the portrayal as MAGA and as Trump as the against the establishment. Okay, if you are going to govern for 8 out of 12 years, richest man in the world, number 1, 2, and 3, are behind you. Those people control the networks in which most people, especially young people, spend most of their spare time. The elections have become something that has gone from debates, etc., to, okay, who is micro-targeting certain type of public on the election day. And the fact that an election becomes or stays true to itself pens to the threat of the heroism like the Secretary of State of Georgia in 2020 that at very great personal expense did refuse to overturn the result. The thing is that who is the establishment?
Well,
The thing is that it's not a MAGA establishment now.
yeah, they will be on Monday. They will be on Monday, and it will be very interesting to see whether the establishment tames them, or whether they, as they say, bring it all down. So it was very interesting to see a confirmation hearing a couple of days ago. Pete Hegseth, the former Fox News presenter turned Trump's nominee for defense secretary, who has been running on various issues like women shouldn't be in combat, and we must return to a warrior culture in the DoD, whatever that means.
No long hair.
Right. But he was also running on there should be a 10-year moratorium on generals after they leave service from going to work for private defense contractors. Seems to me an eminently sensible idea, right? Great idea, that. In the confirmation hearing, Senator Elizabeth Warren was like, what a great idea, I agree with you on that. If you are confirmed as Secretary of Defense, would you also hold yourself to that standard? Oh, I'd have to look at the rules. So this guy immediately, right? You can tell this guy is going to be tamed by the establishment, right? He's going to chuck stones while he's outside. As soon as he's in, he's going to be there. He's going to be in the revolving doors. I hope I'm not libeling anyone, but that's my supposition.
He was honest enough.
Honest, right? Yeah, it was honest. But so that kind of, if you're interested in the survival of the establishment, for good or for ill, then that gives you hope, right? This guy's just as corrupt as everybody else. It's fine, guys. It's all going to be fine. Some others may not be so tameable by the establishment. I mean, Bobby Kennedy Jr., who may or may not end up in charge of HHS, Health and Human Services, basically Health Secretary. Now that sounds like probably a sort of slightly niche job in America. They don't have an NHS or whatever. Actually, Bobby Jr. believes that COVID was the result of a secret American bioweapons program run out of the Department for Health and Human Services, right? And he really doesn't seem to be sort of very susceptible to being tamed by the establishment. So you have somebody who, and by the way, there are certain, again, small grains of truth to what he believes. There is a department in the Department of HHS that is in charge of biodefense, who do what is called gain-of-function research, which is trying to change microbes to see how they could be more infectious, how you could prepare for them, right? Prepare perhaps for a pandemic. And that is run out of HHS, and it was run by Anthony Fauci. What there isn't is any evidence that there was a biological weapons program. Big missing piece of the evidence for this conspiracy theory, but never mind. But when you put somebody like that in charge, who believes that something as fundamental as the health service is really something completely different, that it's that as he has put it, we are being lied to by a matrix of the CDC, the FDA, then you think, well, is the establishment going to succumb to, yeah.
Let's get the microphone over here, but I'm going to jump in. There is a big question here, and then it's your turn, sir.
And after that, Mike has been.
I'm sorry.
Just because I know his name, has been holding up his hand.
Well, I shouldn't have used my. But there's a big question here about America Works and what happens next. Whether you're talking about health or the FBI. It's a big country. There are big institutions. So there's the HSS, but there's also the Centers for Disease Control. There's the vast healthcare industry.
They're underneath you. Yeah.
And so that question is, does it withstand whatever onslaught, whatever storm is coming? Is the America that we thought we knew still there in 2028?
I don't know. I honestly, I don't know. I think if we go a little bit further than 2028, and we look at how technology is changing everything, and is sort of almost exponentially going to change things when very powerful AI comes into force. Do we think that in 100 years' time we will be living, Americans will be living, or even we will be living, under the same kind of system of parliamentary or presidential democracy that we currently live under? I would guess not. I think that the big seismic changes that are happening at the moment, the big technology-led epochal shift that we're in the middle of, is going to change things in a very big way, in a similar way to the way the printing press changed and laid waste to the feudal order and gave rise to the modern nation state and the Age of Enlightenment and all sorts of good stuff. But it was pretty rocky along the road. So I think we're in for big changes, and I think it's going to be bumpy. Some of it might be good. Who knows? Like we should avoid being so kind of timorous about the future and thinking that we have achieved the perfect end state of governance. We clearly haven't, right? So.
Is that clear?
Yeah, I think it's more for people who may be listening online. But speak up anyway.
Anyway, I will speak up. Look, we're dealing with something extremely fundamental here. It's very interesting, conspiracy theories, but that isn't the driver, and nor is inflation the driver. What is the driver is a loss of confidence in 70 million people in the United States. I mean, I saw that poll 2 weeks before. You were absolutely right. It was 60. I read it exactly like you. I thought, that frightened me to death. I thought, my God, that's 60% believe America is failing. Now, you've got to go to the fundamentals. This is the leading superstate in the world. It looks up and it says, hang on, we can't control inflation, we can't control migration, and actually, if I'm honest, we could be number 2. So this is a failure of empire. That's why I'm forced into thinking like that, because this is so fundamental. And in that case, pretty smart for a politician to say, make the empire great again. I don't use the MAGA, but make the empire great again. That's what the people want. And I spend a lot of time with Americans, and I was talking with my friend over here about people from Montana, and we were sitting around the table. They were nice, decent people. They were hysterical in their support for Trump because we've lost our way. It was such a fundamental thing. So we've got a mass loss of confidence in the United States. And boy, there's a coming storm. And the other thing I'd say, Gabriel, to you, and I'm sure you've covered this, we've got a coming storm for one reason as well, because the Democrats are completely at sea. There is nobody. Newsom isn't going to do the job. And so Trump is going to have a free hand. He's taken on the Supreme Court. He's going to change the institutions. And remember, America doesn't run with politics. America, if you've ever done business with them, they run with the institutions. But once he starts to undermine the institutions, then we're in real serious trouble.
Well, he, of course, believes that America shouldn't run with the institutions because that's their whole shtick, is the institutions are not elected, they're not democratic. It's the.
But he's got to create Trump institutions. That's what he's going to do, and that's going to be a disaster. But I want that idea, that they are the empire. They are number 1. They've grown up with Hollywood telling them they're number 1. They are not number 1. They share it with China now.
I agree with you, and I think a lot of what you're talking about comes out of a mismatch between lived experience and the story, the prevailing story that prevails in the. I keep using this word, establishment media, but it's not just the media. It's the story that Hollywood tells. It's the story that the newspapers and magazines tell. It's the story. It's that we tell each other, right? The story Americans tell themselves. And there is a mismatch between the myth and the reality, and the mismatch, the disjoinder is wider and wider. The gulf is growing. And I think, it's very prosaic, and I would say this because I'm a journalist, but I think the loss of good local journalism and its replacement by YouTube and TikTok, it has been one of the main drivers of this. I mean, if you look at the figures for what happened to local newspapers around America during the 90s, and then how it was then taken over by Facebook, where they stepped into the void, it kind of correlates with this rise of paranoia and conspiracy.
Hang on.
I just want to Susan.
Okay, briefly, and then I want to hear from you and at the back there.
Yeah, sorry. A word I didn't use. I want that. The word is myth. Because you go back through history, look when the myths were broken, that's when you had the revolutions and changes.
Okay, so let's go there and then to the back.
Mike Lanchin, former colleague of Gabriel. Nice to see you, Gabriel. I'm interested in sort of looking ahead and wanting to know your insight into what the guys in QAnon and these other groups are thinking now. You've spent time with them. The podcast makes it very clear, that you got what they were saying at the time, and what's going through their minds now, because as you say, the lunatics are now in charge of the manicomio, in charge of the lunatics house, so of the asylum. So there's this balance that Trump's going to have to keep about promising that he's going to rip things up, but he's actually going to have to make things work as well.
And that's. Yeah, I mean, I think
what's going to happen with the QAnon guys? What are they saying now?
Well, QAnon has kind of died. Q disappeared. QAnon has morphed into various other conspiracy theories. It was Stop the Steal for a while. It sort of had various other iterations, including now America being sort of obsessed with Britain's, all the people who were kind of into QAnon back then, 4 years ago, are now into Keir Starmer and grooming gangs, right? And Elon Musk obviously has been kind of turning his gaze on this country. Luckily, Elon Musk, brilliant and mercurial though he is in many ways, has a very feeble grasp of British politics and thinks that Tommy Robinson is a greater electoral asset than Nigel Farage. So I think we're safe from Elon Musk's meddling, as it were. You don't think so? Well, anyway, at least he's... At least I think that the fact that no one will say, Elon, mate, you're barking up the wrong tree with the Tommy Robinson thing, is kind of gives me hope that he's kind of dumb enough to play it wrong.
I don't know.
Go on.
I'm just being. I keep following X, and I shouldn't really, but you know the amount of mileage he gets on just pumping out this crap. I think just social media. Sorry. Hi, my name is Shirley.
Hi.
I just think that the social media it's playing such a big part in this. And what sort of scares me, we sort of laugh and go, Elon can't touch us here. If he sort of keeps pumping this stuff and picking up crap in this country where people are getting really agitated and let's get Farage in control and all this, it just seems to be eddying around. And
no, you're right. I shouldn't dismiss it so flippantly. You're quite right.
It sort of worries me. I guess for making sense of Trump's return, I'm sort of interested in your take and as everyone else's take of where we go as a country here and what we're looking out for, and what we can do to almost protect ourselves. I feel like I need hand holding to how we can best move through this, or what we're sort of looking out for.
Well, just to quickly finish answering Mike's question, I think they're going to eat each other, and you can already see it, right? Yeah. So you can already see Steve Bannon and Elon Musk at war over which direction MAGA takes, and they have very different visions. Elon Musk and his Silicon Valley bros are cuckoos in the nest of the how we navigate our way through it is very difficult, and sadly I don't think we are going to see a renaissance in great local journalism that will replace the sort of instant video that why is nobody covering this kind of vibe that all of this runs on. Why is nobody talking about this? Well, because there are no good local journalists anymore. So so I'm sorry, I don't have a good answer for you. There was somebody else.
Yeah, there are 4 hands, and I don't want to run out. So yes, over there, and then we'll just come around the room. And can we get a microphone, please?
I've got one.
Great.
Katie, I'm a historian at Harvard. I wanted to ask about the explanatory power that you give to specifically not just the internet, but the unmoderated message board, 4chan, like the wild west of the internet. And obviously we've seen the rise of the alt-right, the extreme right, not only in the US, where you've done this brilliant work on going into those message boards and seeing what's happening, but in Europe. And I wondered whether there are parallel uses of those forums to develop the kind of conspiratorial thinking or far-right thinking that you've uncovered in the US that you know about or have heard about, whether those same drivers are at stake in other kind of theatres.
Yeah, I think they definitely are. By nature, they sort of, they focus on America because it's, America's the kind of the heart of the internet and the English language, but absolutely they do, and they come over here. And as I said, this whole kind of Keir Starmer thing, that's been going on for quite a while. And I remember, when was this? 2021 maybe, when Boris Johnson made a little foray in the Houses of Parliament, in the House, where he tried to gin up this idea about Keir Starmer going soft on Savile, right? Exactly. And I remember thinking at the time, the massive alarm bells ringing, thinking ding, 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 ding. All of this stuff kind of started on 4chan. I think 4chan is less of a driver now than it was a decade ago. Because I think this stuff has now become so mainstream. But I think as a sort of origin story, it's worth studying. But I think for now, it's gone way beyond that. It's all over Reddit, it's YouTube, it's TikTok, it's everywhere.
The gentleman with the green shirt, and then we'll come here, and here if you want.
Thank you. Oh, God. I'm Hemel. I work in new nuclear energy. I wanted to ask, what do you think the Democrats need to do to form an effective opposition?
Well, I think they need to acknowledge the very real ways in which Americans rightly feel that their system is broken and it's not serving them. I think by virtue of Trump and MAGA world being the sort of crazy conspiracy people who were kind of spouting crazy stuff, but also actually at the same time actually quite astute at identifying where problems were. The Democrats became the party of not listening, everything's fine, everything you say is rubbish. They need to stop doing that, and they need to acknowledge where things are going wrong and why there is this massive distrust. And it's not just disinformation and misinformation, it's real economic issues, basically. I mean, Bill Clinton wasn't wrong. It is the economy, stupid.
As James Carville reminded himself in the New York Times the other day.
Right. So I think that's the initial thing. I mean, I sometimes wonder about a counterfactual in which Bernie Sanders had won the nomination in 2016. I don't think he would have won. I think Trump still would have won. But I wonder whether, in the same way as I wonder what would have happened to Brexit if Corbyn had just been like, yeah, I'm also a Brexiteer, but for a different reason. I wonder what would have happened to the debate here, to the flavour of Brexit. If you'd had a Democrat running who said, I agree with a lot of the issues that Trump is picking up on. I agree with those, and I think he's right on that, because I met a lot of Bernie bros in those early days on QAnon conferences. A lot of people whose entry point into this whole QAnon movement had been, the Democrats. The Democrat machine screwed Bernie Sanders out of the nomination in 2016, which of course they kind of did. Surprise, surprise. The establishment Democrats supported the establishment candidate. Like it's not really a conspiracy. It's just politics. But that was their entry point, and these people then became QAnoners and kind of MAGA supporters.
Microphone here, and then the gentleman in the grey T-shirt.
Thanks, my name's Ben. Does Trump have to actually care about the support of QAnon and their progeny over the next few years? Because, and if he doesn't, is there just going to be huge civil unrest in the States, which I fear? Why does he actually have to care about their support?
Well, I mean, again, QAnon, we sort of use it loosely. It's actually dead, but the sort of conspiratorial wing of the MAGA movement, if you like, which is actually a very broad swathe of it, if you look at the polling. I mean, he has to care about it in the sense that it's a big electoral asset for him, and as he instinctually understood in 2020 when QAnon was first coming up. When nobody really knew what it was, apart from people on 4chan. But there's that great clip where where finally QAnon had been around for about 3 years, and finally somebody in the mainstream media starts picking up on it, and finally somebody asks him about it at a White House press conference, and this reporter goes, she says, Mr. President, is it true that there's this QAnon thing where you're supposedly saving the world from a cabal of satanic pedophiles? Does that sound like something you... And he goes, well, I don't know a lot about them, but is that supposed to be a good thing or a bad thing? So he understood instinctually. It's an instinctual politician, and he's got killer instincts, and he understood that this was a big constituency for him, and I think he will continue to understand that.
He's not running for election again.
He's not running for election again, but actually I don't think he really cares about that. He cares about his ego. I do think, on the question of unrest, I think that the prospect of major unrest has been mitigated, or at the very least postponed, by Trump's victory. I think if there had been a narrow Kamala Harris victory, I think we would be in a much more volatile place right now.
Yeah.
Thanks, I'm Mark. Gabriel, you cover the world. America can be seen as a laughingstock. The conspiracy theories, we struggle. There are some in Europe, but things like the EU taking Meta to court, Zuckerberg as much pleading with Trump for help with the rest of his market as much as kowtowing for the US, I think. And with the rise of BRICS and others, America's going into isolationism rather than into demonstrating that they're the beacon on a hill. They've got corruption, they've got conspiracy, they've got criminals running, or alleged criminals, all over the place.
That's
How do you see
conspiracy theory.
how do you see that works out for world order? I guess will America be?
Yeah, I mean,
in the end, will NATO kick America out?
Oh, well, I don't know about that. I mean, I think they would struggle with their funding if they kicked America out. There's sort of hard balance sheet questions to be asked there. But I do think that this whole idea of a new American century is not going to be quite as American as it's not going to be the unipolar world order as you pointed out. It's just, China is here, and so I think the Pax Americana or whatever, the American century, the new American century, I think that's going to change. How is it going to play out? Are we talking about the defense of Europe and NATO and all of that kind of stuff? Yeah, I think I don't have a crystal ball answer for you, but I think things are going to change.
If we chose to go to China, the Americans wouldn't go to China at the moment because Europe's facing a bit of a different way, I think.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think Europe is facing a different way. I mean, not all of Europe is facing in the same way. There's a lot of kind of tension in Europe. Hungary's facing one way, and who knows what the Dutch are doing these days. I grew up in Holland. What the hell is going on there? It's crazy. Again, like going back to my point about an epochal shift, I think we're going to see a huge amount of change, and that will include change in institutions and the way we're governed over the rest of our lifetimes, basically, and certainly our children's lifetimes. And I think by the end of my kids' lives, they're now 6 and 2, they're going to be living in a very, very different world where all of this, some of it will look kind of quaint,
Yes, so let's do this very quickly. Just remember, it doesn't have to be a question. Just say what's on your mind, and we'll take 3 at once, because we're near the bottom of the hour. Do they still say that?
They do say the bottom of the hour, yeah.
So right at the back, and then in the middle, and we've heard from you already. So we've got to give people turns, and then right in the second row. But start at the back.
So my name is Jonathan. How will the MAGA base handle the inevitable coming to light of the venality, the corruption, the incompetence? Are they sort of so spellbound and so kind of under Trump's spell in particular that there'll be a kind of cognitive dissonance? One imagines he's going to blame everybody else, the deep state, immigrants, and one sort of senses that he'll just somehow be able to deflect it. But how do you see the psychology of his base?
Okay, well, and let's take that on board. And the next one.
Right, as Patrick Newman, it's one of the fears that I have is that he has both houses. He has the Supreme Court, and that might even be further in his direction if somebody falls over. What do you think would he be daring enough to say, I'm going to run for a third time?
Okay. Was there a third one? We haven't. Someone haven't. No. Okay.
I had a go, but
let's take those 2.
Okay. In answer to your question about would he run for a third time, I think he's already hinted that he might if they asked him to, which is a very kind of Putin flex. And Putin, I think, is also the template that you're looking for here when the inevitable venality and corruption of his administration comes to light. I mean, obviously he will say it's fake news and whatnot, but I think the MAGA base, who are not dim and dumb and idiots, they really aren't. And I also think that people who kind of fall for conspiracy theories aren't dim and dumb and idiots. I don't know how many people in this room thought that Donald Trump was a Russian agent circa 2017. I thought he might have been. It was a conspiracy theory, right? So let's be kinder to our conspiracy theory brethren. But the Putin. My background's in Russia. That's what I studied, and I spent a lot of time reporting from there and from Ukraine. The Putin flex was always, my underlings are corrupt, and I will fire some underlings. But the Tsar is noble. And the Tsar is good, and the Tsar is correct. And if only the Tsar could see the awful things that were being done in his name, then I think there will inevitably be corruption and all of that kind of stuff. And to the extent that it can't be washed away with, it's the fake news media, I think that's what will happen.
Alternatively, there is sort of like the idea of the 2-step with the vice president.
Right, you mean, okay. There we go. There we go.
JD.
There we go. The Medvedev shuffle, I think it's called in the trade, yeah.
Look, I think we're going to try and be efficient, keep to time, so our time is up. But thank you very much. It remains for me only to remind everybody that books will be on sale, and to quote back at you, let's be kinder to our conspiracy theory brethren. I think on that note of incredible magnanimity and kindness is a good one to end on. And what? He's going to sign them.
Oh yeah, I'll sign them.
It's not just the books. You get them signed. Gabriel, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.